When I turned 18, I was working at a factory, helping out the family like I should. But after Pearl Harbor, after hearing about what the Japanese did and what was happening in Europe with Hitler, I knew in my heart that I had to serve. It wasn't really a choice for me. It was a calling. I felt like I owed it to my country, to my family, to everyone. So, in 1942, I enlisted. My mother cried. She didn't want me to go, but she understood. After basic training, I was assigned to an engineering unit. We did a lot of construction work, building barracks, runways, fortifications. For a while, I thought maybe I'd spend the whole war doing that. But then, in late 1943, everything changed. They transferred us to Virginia for specialized training. We started learning about amphibious operations, how to land on beaches under fire, how to coordinate with Navy support, how to survive in chaos. We practiced over and over again on the Virginia coast. None of us knew where we were going, but we all had a feeling it would be something big. By spring of 1944, the rumors started flying in. Everyone knew something massive was about to happen. You could feel it in the air. The camps were packed with soldiers. Equipment was everywhere. There was this electricity of anticipation and fear mixed together. We'd go out on practice runs, and we'd come back wondering, is this it? Is this a real invasion? We'd sit around and talk about where they were going to send us. France, probably. Most of us figured it would be France. In early June, they gathered us all together and told us. They showed us maps, Normandy, the beaches, the German positions. They explained the objective. They told us the casualties would probably be high. They didn't sugarcoat it. Some of the guys got real quiet. I remember one soldier, a kid from Maine, he just kept staring at his rifle. But we all knew this was why we'd trained so hard, why we'd sacrificed so much. This was our moment. On June 5th, 1944, we loaded onto the transport ships. The night before the invasion, nobody slept much. I remember standing on the deck, looking out at the ocean, thinking about my family back home. I was 20 years old. I'd never been outside the United States before this war, and now I was about to land on a hostile beach in France. I said a prayer. I'm Catholic, and my faith has always been important to me. I prayed for my family, for my buddies, for all the soldiers around me. I prayed that God would protect us, or at least that He'd give us the courage to do our duty. The morning of June 6th came gray and cold. The ocean was rough. A lot of guys were seasick in the landing craft. We could hear the artillery in the distance, the planes overhead. The Navy was pounding the German positions. We knew they'd had all night to prepare for us. The beach would be hell. I was in the third wave. When that landing craft door dropped, the first thing that hit me was the noise. The screaming, the gunfire, the explosions, everything all at once. It was like nothing I could have prepared for. We jumped into the water, and it was cold, up to my chest. The beach was chaos, absolute chaos. There were bodies everywhere. American bodies, German bodies. There were wounded men crying out. The sand was soaked red with blood. A buddy of mine, Tommy, same name as my childhood friend, he was right next to me. We were trying to move up the beach toward the seawall, but the German fire was relentless. Machine guns, rifles, mortars, they were hitting us from the bluffs above. We lost half our squad just trying to get across that beach. I saw Tommy go down. A bullet caught him in the shoulder. I tried to help him, but another soldier pulled me along. "Keep moving," he yelled. "We gotta keep moving." We finally made it to the seawall and huddled there, trying to catch our breath. I was shaken, not just from fear, but from the adrenaline and the cold water. Around us, sergeants were organizing the survivors, trying to form units again. We'd lost so many people just getting to that wall. Our commanding officer, Captain Morrison, he had blood running down his face from a shrapnel wound, but he just kept directing us. "We need to get over that wall and inland," he kept saying. "We can't stay here." A few of us worked together to create a diversion. We threw smoke grenades, and while the Germans were distracted, we rushed the wall. We got over, but not without more casualties. When I looked back at that beach, even though I'd only been there for maybe 20 minutes, it looked like something out of hell. The water was red. There were so many bodies. Equipment was scattered everywhere. And we kept coming. Wave after wave of Americans, British and Canadians, just pouring onto that beach. Once we got inland, the nature of the fighting changed. We were in the Norman bocage, these thick hedgerows and dense vegetation that made it almost like fighting in a maze. The Germans were dug in, and they knew the terrain better than we did. We'd move forward a few hundred yards, then get pinned down by sniper fire or a hidden machine gun nest. It was slow, brutal, frustrating work. For weeks we pushed inland. Every day we lost friends. I watched men I'd trained with, men I'd eaten with, men I'd joked with and shared cigarettes with. I watched them die. Sometimes it was quick, sometimes it was slow and painful. There was this one kid, couldn't have been more than 19, he took shrapnel in his abdomen. We couldn't do much for him. He died in a field hospital 3 days later, calling for his mother the whole time. We saw things that no human should have to see. In one village, we found German soldiers who'd been killed by their own officers for trying to surrender. In another place, we found the remains of what had been a French family, caught in the crossfire. War does things to you. It hardens you. It changes you in ways you can't predict. You learn to accept death as just another part of the day. You learn not to think too much about tomorrow. By August, we'd pushed the Germans back, and the breakout from Normandy was underway. We were moving faster now, covering more ground. We went through France, through Belgium. The summer turned to fall, and we thought maybe the war would be over before winter. We were wrong. In December 1944, we got orders to move to a place called Bastogne in Belgium. We didn't know it yet, but the Germans were about to launch a massive counteroffensive, what would become known as the Battle of the Bulge. We dug in around Bastogne, set up defensive positions, and waited. We didn't have to wait long. The German attack came hard and fast, thousands of them. We were outnumbered and nearly surrounded, but we held our ground. That battle was the worst I experienced during the entire war. The cold was brutal. We're talking sub-zero temperatures. Men froze to death in their foxholes. Others got trench foot so bad they couldn't walk. We had limited ammunition, limited food, limited medical supplies. We were basically under siege. I remember one night I was so cold I could barely feel my fingers. I wrapped them in cloth and tried to do push-ups in my foxhole to keep the blood flowing. Sounds crazy, but you do what you have to do to survive. A sergeant came by and found me doing this in the middle of the night. He just nodded and moved on. He understood. We all understood that it was survival or death. The Germans threw everything at us: artillery, mortars, wave after wave of infantry. But we held. American soldiers held. We weren't going to give up Bastogne, and we didn't. After nearly a week, American relief forces broke through, and the Germans were forced to withdraw. We'd survived the Bulge, but we'd paid a terrible price. Of the 300 men I'd started with in my unit, fewer than 100 of us were still combat effective. From there, we pushed into Germany. The fighting was different now. The Germans were falling back, but they were still fighting hard in some places. We liberated several towns. I'll never forget the look on people's faces when they realized we were Americans, not Germans. The relief, the joy, the tears. Some people thought their whole world had ended under Nazi rule, and now there was hope. By May of 1945, it was over. Germany surrendered. We got the news, and I don't know, there wasn't this huge celebration like you might expect. We were just exhausted. Relieved, sure, but mostly just tired. We'd been in combat for almost a year. We'd seen and done things that would stay with us forever. I spent another year in Europe, helping with occupation duties and processing out soldiers. Then, in 1946, I finally got to go home. I remember the ship pulling into New York Harbor, and I saw the Statue of Liberty. I actually cried. After everything I'd been through, after losing so many friends, I was going home. I was alive. When I got back to Philadelphia, my family was waiting. My mother hugged me and wouldn't let go. My father, he wasn't a very emotional man, but I could see the tears in his eyes. That night we had dinner together. Nothing fancy, just home cooking, and it was the best meal I'd ever had. I'd been dreaming about my mother's cooking the whole time I was overseas. I met a girl named Rosalie not long after I got home. She was working at a diner near my neighborhood. We got married in 1947, and we had 4 children together. I worked as a carpenter like my father, and we built a good life. But the war never really left me. There were nights I had nightmares. There were days I'd hear a loud noise and instinctively duck for cover. There were times when I'd be fine, and then something would trigger a memory, and I'd be right back there in Normandy or Belgium. Many years later, in 2019, I got the opportunity to go back to Normandy. I was 75 years old, and they were having a big commemoration for the 75th anniversary of D-Day. I didn't know if I should go. I wasn't sure I was ready to face those ghosts, but my kids encouraged me, and my wife said I should do it. When I stepped onto that beach again, something broke open inside me. 75 years later, and I could still see it exactly as it was. The German machine gun nests on the bluffs, the obstacles on the beach, the places where my friends had fallen. I walked to a small memorial, and I just stood there, thinking about Tommy, about Captain Morrison, about all the guys who didn't make it home. I said prayers for them. I cried. Even after all those years, the emotions were still raw. I visited a museum there, and they had records of everyone who'd died in the invasion. I spent hours looking through those names. I found some of my friends. For each name, I said a little prayer. It was important to me to acknowledge them, to remember them, to make sure their sacrifice wasn't forgotten. When I finally left Normandy that day, I felt like I'd closed a chapter. I'd faced those demons, and they didn't have the same power over me anymore. I didn't sleep well that night, but it was a different kind of not sleeping well. It was peaceful, somehow. I'd made peace with my past. Now, at 97 years old, I talk to young people about my experiences. I go to schools, I speak at events, and I always tell them the same thing. There's no glory in war. War is hell. It's horrifying and traumatic, and it changes you forever. I'm not proud of the killing I did. I'm proud that I served my country, but I'm not proud of the killing. I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful that I got to come home and build a family and live a full life. I'm grateful for the men and women who served with me, and I mourn those who didn't come home. My generation, we call ourselves the greatest generation, and I suppose there's some truth to that. We did what we had to do when our country needed us, but we paid a price for it. Many of us still carry the scars, some physical, most of them invisible. If I could give advice to young people today, I'd tell them to appreciate peace. Appreciate your freedom. Appreciate your family. Appreciate the safety you live in, because not everyone in this world has that. Millions died in World War II, soldiers and civilians. All those lives, all that suffering, it was so that we could have peace and freedom. I'm glad I'm still here to tell my story. I'm glad that people want to listen, because if we don't remember, if we don't tell these stories, then all that sacrifice becomes meaningless. So I'll keep telling my story as long as I'm able. And I hope that young people will listen, not because they want to glorify war, but because they want to understand what it really costs. That's my legacy. That's what I want to leave behind.